Let's talk about the Australian Grand Prix race. Let's do a recap there. It was a crazy start with both George and Lewis getting past Max there as we had lights out and away we go in that first two turns. It was crazy. I couldn't believe that George and Lewis made it past Max. And Alonso was looking pretty solid to make it past as well. Then very early on, I think it was Stroll who ended up hitting Leclerc, and Leclerc ended up getting beached. So that caused a safety car. And remember that Perez started from the back. He decided to pit during that safety car. It was very sad for Ferrari there. They had a very unlucky start to the race. It was just, oh, you hate to see it. But in the end, yeah, Perez decided to pit right away. I think for this race, I wasn't actually expecting it to be too fun. I thought it was going to be quite boring. But then, looking at the feeder series, seeing F2 and F3 having all these crashes in their races, I thought, oh, maybe it could happen here. And based off of Perez's qualifying, running off the track, other people also running off the track in practice and qualifying, it made me think maybe the race would be exciting. And yeah, it was right there, 100% correct there. Regarding pit strategies, there wasn't too much exciting stuff to look out for there. Like Perez pitted onto, well, he started on hards, he pitted onto mediums, and then the second lap of the safety car, still same safety car, Perez pitted again back to hards because they thought, if there's no more safety cars, he won't have to pit again, and that's his way of making his way up the field. So people were pretty convinced, I think mostly based off of how Alex Albon took the race last year. He obviously raced pretty much the whole race on hards and then just pitted at the end of the race because he had a mandatory pit stop and got points. And that worked well for him. So maybe they were thinking Perez could do the same thing and that would be the strategy there. Obviously the race got underway again and then Alex Albon crashed. He had a pretty hectic crash. I was mind blown. It was just out of nowhere. Didn't expect it. But yeah, it was a rough crash for Alex, which was a big shame because he was in the points. He was doing well. He qualified really well. Obviously, with Leclerc going out, I think for a while he was in P6 or was P7. I can't remember. He was doing really well. I was so excited for him. And then poor Alex Albon ended up having that crash, causing our first red flag of the session because they got a lot of gravel on the track. Alex's car was pretty stuffed up, so they had to not fix it. They had to take it off the track, which involved a lot of time. So the race directors decided to red flag the race, to which I say was good because usually what happens is they have a safety car and the safety car goes around for ages before they eventually we should probably red flag the race. This time they were on it. They red flagged it straight away. It still screwed George and Stroll quite a lot because they decided to pit, and I thought that was a smart move. You could hear it's quite funny. Lewis was complaining on the radio. He's like, oh man, guys, we should have pitted and we missed out this opportunity, which I don't think he should have because I think you could see, was it Sainz who pitted? I think Sainz also pitted the same lap there that George and Stroll pitted because Stroll came out, or maybe it wasn't Stroll who pitted. I can't remember. I think it was Stroll and Sainz. George pitted. Sainz was obviously not too far behind, and Sainz pitted, and you could see that Sainz came out he lost way more track positions. I think George came out around 7th and Sainz came out around 12th. So it really, you could see they were so close together. If Lewis had pitted, he would have lost track position. He would have been behind Sainz. He would have been all the way back in P14 or something. So he would have been really screwed over by that, the red flag that happened straight after those guys pitting. So I think it's good that the FIA was quick with that. Obviously, you have to react quickly in those scenarios, and George got unlucky. The FIA couldn't have known right away, we should make this a red flag. Obviously, they're very quick to say, safety car, we got to chill. Yellow flag, safety car, stop. That was good. And that gives them time to essentially slow down and time for the FIA to decide. But obviously, just based off where the cars were on the track, it meant that these guys were unlucky in the sense that they decided to riskfully gamble on pitting there and assuming that the race would work out in their favor if they pitted then. Because, again, here's the logic going through their heads. Knowing that the drivers can essentially make it to the end of the race without needing to pit later on hards, pitting now and then just saying, okay, we're going to be on hards for the rest of the race, that's a great strategy for them. If there's no more incidents, that works out really well in their favor. Obviously, unfortunately for them, there were lots of incidents. Obviously, the restart happened after the red flag, and it was a fairly decent restart. I don't think too much chaos happened in that red flag restart. Lewis was able to hold position for a while, which was also cool to see, and unfortunately for Alonso, he couldn't keep up with them. I mean, he was there, he was trying, but then he went into like management zone, which is good. Alonso managed the race very well. He did a great job. Unfortunately, after all that, George's engine ended up dying and went on fire. So it was a pretty spectacular burn to the ground moment. I couldn't believe that. That was really sad to see for George. So in the end, it's like a bit bittersweet because it's not that what if. No, it's not bittersweet. It can't be bittersweet to not finish the race because, again, the what if, there were so many opportunities later on where things could have happened with the red flags and crashes. Like the race could have gone completely differently if his car didn't do that. But effectively, if his car was going to burn out there that early into the race, it would have probably happened regardless of whether or not he pitted. So it just made everything a bit pointless and meaningless. Then nothing much happened. I kind of fell asleep during the rest of the race because it was just like, okay, well, nobody's going to pit. Perez is going to make overtakes, but it's not going to be that impressive. Which they were very impressive. He had some great overtakes on people, and he went for it, which I was quite impressed by Perez's actions, given the fact that he was looking so lacking with confidence in the whole weekend. He did some fantastic overtakes. I think like half the year's overtakes are going to go to Perez just in Australia. So that was cool to see. I woke up occasionally for hearing a Crofty shout like, "Oh, what an amazing overtake for Perez!" It was very enjoyable. Then I started waking up thinking, okay, it's the last few laps of the race. Alonso's probably going to push. Drivers are going to do some crazy moves to try and get those positions. You know, they played the management game, and now we're going to see some chaos at the end of the race. I was pretty sure that was going to happen. But then we had that crazy crash from K-Mag, so unexpected. He just nicked the wall. He just took that corner a little bit too wide, which was, I guess it was probably due to the sun going in his eyes. That's probably the main cause of that. The sun was setting due to all the other red flags and safety cars. They had talked about this in practice, saying like, hey, if the race goes on with red flags and safety cars in the F1 race, we're going to have some sun going in drivers' eyes. And I think that caused some chaos last year as well. It was either there or it was Miami. It might have been both. But we had some good chaos going on there. And this makes me excited for the Miami Grand Prix. This Australian Grand Prix was very enjoyable. I love the fact that we have gravel, everything all over the place. Anyways, let's move on to talking about that. We had a red flag caused by K-Mag's big out-of-nowhere crash. And that red flag restart was crazy because it was essentially going to be 2 racing laps from a standstill start. But we didn't even get that far because we didn't even make it through the first sector without chaos occurring. It started off in turn 1 where Sainz, he tapped Alonso and Alonso spun out, and that was Alonso's race ruined, which was so unfortunate. Then we had Perez go pretty much off the road. That was just out of the blue. Like, you know, you don't even notice in all this because you're too busy looking at Alonso going. So people are just going all over the place. It looked like F1 game lobbies. It was crazy. Part of that, before the rest of the chaos happened, was Logan Sargent right at the back just crashed into De Vries, which is just so unnecessary. Like, I mean, Logan wasn't having a good race. He didn't qualify as well as Albon. He was literally at the back. He was like the last person to really finish. He just... that was an unnecessary crash, costing obviously both teams a lot of money. These aren't like really good doing teams, so that's just an unnecessary crash from them. They could have probably bagged points if they weren't crashing. If, you know, if all the other bad stuff didn't happen, like, it's hard to explain. Obviously, big crashes happened. It suddenly meant that the grid was completely shuffled, but then they reversed back to what the grid was before the restart happened. So it wouldn't have worked out in Logan Sargent and De Vries' favor. But, you know, if things had worked out differently, that could have been points for Logan Sargent and De Vries because they would have scored points. While other people like Gasly and them crashed out and Alonso and Stroll spun out and all that stuff. Because at the end, it was Alonso and Stroll at the back, just behind De Vries and... Well, I mean, behind them was De Vries and Logan Sargent. So, yeah. Anyways, the big thing that was the main cause of that red flag was the next red flag, the one that followed. We're running our red flag counting here. But Gasly went off and he came back on the track and took out Ocon. Terrible move. Like, this is similar to what Gasly did last year with Miami. Like, you know, he locked up, went off, had a bad one. And then when he re-entered the track, he took out Norris in Miami last year. This year, he did the same thing. He did it with Ocon. Obviously, it wasn't like teammate beef. It was just an accident. I'm sure they're not going to blame each other for it. It's just very, very unlucky for the Alpines. It's not like Ocon. I don't think Ocon's going to be very mad at Gasly. He's going to be disappointed and sad, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some serious beef they're going like. It is hectic for the Alpines because both Gasly and Ocon were going to score points. They're pretty much like best of the rest team going strong. And alas, I actually have to look at the standings and see where the teams are standing. I've looked at the driver standings, but I need to look at the teams as well. So I'll look at that and talk about that later on in this podcast. Anyway, another thing that happened was Stroll went off the track. He got beached. Almost. He was not beached because he was able to get back on the track. But after all that chaos, Stroll went off and lost all these positions, which, was such a bad one for Aston Martin. They were so, like, they had it right until the end and then they didn't have it. Luckily for them, like, in the end, we had to have this long wait, decision for an outcome. After all those spins and crashes and chaos, Hulkenberg was fourth. And in my mind, which obviously was in the FIA's mind as well, is Sainz caused Alonso to spin, which could result in a penalty, which could mean that Hulkenberg would have moved up to getting his first podium. And it would have also been Haas's first ever podium. It would have been a huge thing for Haas. Very, very, very unfortunate that that happened the way it did, because in the end, they reversed the results, which I agree with, because if you look at how they handled Silverstone last year, it's pretty much the same way they handled it there. So they're following the rulebook well. I think maybe I should talk about this well, like now. I think the FIA did a good job today. I think they were quick on calling red flags. I think that last decision after that chaos to call a red flag instead of a safety car to end the race, I think either way would have been very interesting. But yeah, the fact that they red flagged it there just got me super excited. Mainly because I thought that maybe they will. Well, I can't remember which red flag happened. I got excited because I thought it meant that Alonso and Stroll had a chance to get back into this, because I thought they would restart it back to what it was before the restart that happened there. I wish I had reference, because it wasn't just one red flag. That's the problem. But it was cool. It was cool to see. So theoretically, Hulkenberg was very close to a podium. It was a potential huge fail for Aston Martin. Both Alfa Romeos and both McLarens were going to be in the points. In the end, it was both McLarens got points, which was cool. They knew Lando was going to get a good amount of points, and they knew Piastri was going to get a good amount of points. And it was really cool for Piastri to get points on his debut. I think there were a lot of jokes about Michael Massey, because Michael Massey was there in Australia, and I think this race had the same amount of laps as Abu Dhabi, so they're all like, void the last lap and all that stuff. It was chaos. In the end, if you look at the classification, only 12 people actually finished. I mean, a lot of drivers were classified because they made it through like 90% of the race. So even K-Mag theoretically didn't get a DNF result, despite causing that first red flag, because he made it so far into the race. But yeah, only 12 people finished in the end, and the unlucky people in that 12 it was Valtteri Bottas and who else? I can't remember now. I need to look at the results again. Oh, it was Valtteri Bottas and Sainz. It was Valtteri Bottas and Tsunoda, but then Sainz got his penalty, so then it was Valtteri Bottas and Sainz. I didn't even have to look that up. I just recalled it in my memory all by myself, so I'm quite impressed now. And then what was funny on top of all of that, so yeah, obviously poor Sainz got a penalty. Very unexpected. I didn't actually expect. I bet a joke saying that would happen and Hulkenberg would get a podium. Again, Sainz got the penalty, which was unexpected. Hulkenberg didn't get the podium because they reset the results. It was sad. Like, Sainz was heartbroken. He was basically crying over the team radio. I listened to that and it was just so sad to hear. Oscar Piastri was obviously very happy with his points on debut. He said he didn't do a good race, but they got there. I heard Lando talking afterwards as well, and he was, I don't know, he said they were just not unlucky. He was like, they were where they expected to be, which was good. I think, yeah, McLaren, they just got lucky today. I think they got lucky. I don't think they would have done as well as they initially would. You know what I mean. That, like, I just don't think they would have done that well. And having other people crash meant that they were both going to be in the points, and it was really exciting. And then what was really crazy was Hulkenberg, before he even crossed the line, was having engine troubles. Like, he crossed the track, and then right after that, he had to stop right after the finish line. On the radio, it was actually, his car was like live, so he had to do an ERS like exit, which basically means the car's live. If you touch the ground and you touch the car at the same time, you get electrocuted. So when you get out the car, you have to jump off the car, because That's just the thing. And then they have to do a bunch of stuff too. Like this happens a lot in Formula E, but it also happens in Formula One because they do have like a battery system. And it's just based off the areas that they have there. But that caused a red flag after that because you could hear in Piastri, like his race engineer saying, like, it's a red flag. I know the race is done, but it's a red flag. Like, just don't overtake people. It's part of the precautions. You just don't want to have a penalty here. So be careful. If you are listening to the podcast on any platform or on YouTube, please leave a comment because I'm sure there are things that I've missed in the race that I'd love to carry that discussion on in the comments. And yeah, let me know what you think about the podcast. If you're not subscribed to the channel already or following the podcast or you haven't given it a review, just do one of those things. I would really appreciate it if you can like it or give it a heart or whatever. It helps a lot. Like, I'm really trying to grow this podcast, and yeah, your support all means a lot. I just love to hear what you guys think. And if you hear this message, say that you heard it loud and clear and just let me know. I'd love to hear feedback and see if we're doing things right or wrong.